Spyder, Spyder, here comes Spyder, CFL's Red-Zone Rule. Hit it! I'm back! Here's Spyder. Spyder's back. And the reason I'm back, I was supposed to be gone for the summer until the fall. And my 27th, my favorite number, last session I did. And I just got thinking about it, and I don't think I sort of really liked the way, I mean, I was happy with the live take and everything, and remember, all my takes are live, okay? So, but there was a lot of information that my agenda was too long, and I couldn't get it in the 27 minutes, so I had to come back, and also, I want to go out, I think, on the 28th. So can you imagine? It's sort of like an anniversary. 28 YouTube sessions. I put up, my son actually put up my Facebook page up to 27, 23, 24, 25, sorry, 23, 24, 25, and 26, okay? Not 27 yet because he doesn't even know about this, and then I'll have 28 put up. So I'm going to, that will be the end of my YouTube sessions. This time, I mean, I've said that numerous times from 23 onward, and maybe even before that somewhat, but because now it's June, summer's here, Halifax is having a hard time becoming summer. We don't get any springs here, and I'm going to definitely tear my set down, and I got lots of work to do around outside of my house, so I got a lot of work to do, okay? So I'm going to pack it up, and I'll be back in the fall. But before I do that, I'm going to do this final part 28th session, and it's basically going to be Spyder CFL Red-Zone Rule part 28, handcuffing, dictating, Canadian ratio didn't change, but it needs to change. That's going to be a pretty powerful title. Anyway, but it's true. And I call a spade, I do. I'm a straight shooter. I call a spade a spade. It's not a popularity contest here between me and Mr. Ambrosi or anybody else. It's about my passion, and it's about I'm trying to make the CFL better and our game itself a lot better, my CFL Red-Zone Rule. And I'm trying to help the CFL survive. And these days it's not doing very well. And ever since Mark Cohen left, there's been a big shift, and I really believe, like I said in my last session, I lost all respect for Randy Ambrosi, and I think he was a very political choice because Mark Cohen didn't belong to the Canadian Players Association like Ambrosi was. Mark Cohen was a guaranteed, you know, starting racial O-lineman, or okay, like Ambrosi was. So, and Mark Cohen didn't fight the CFL in court when the owners wanted to do just like all the other professional sports leagues are doing, even MLS soccer, by allowing the best players to start and play at every position for entire game in their respective sports leagues, which the CFL can't, and still can't. And Mark Cohen didn't go in court and fight the CFL, okay, because he wanted to remove the Canadian starter race and the Canadian race like they did now, okay? And you know what happened? Nothing happened. Mark Cohen didn't do that because he wasn't political, but Randy Ambrosi did that, and he's the commissioner of the CFL. I think he's more of a commissioner, like I said before, for the Canadian Players and the Canadian Players Association, and he showed that in this scam, CPA deal that, it's not a deal, they scammed, the Canadian Players Association scammed the American players and the CFL and the owners. There's no doubt about it. Because what did the owners get? They didn't get anything but more debt. So anyway, I wanted to, I forgot to say, right at my last, I want to go back to my 27th and read something that I forgot to say. Well, actually, I said it, but just briefed it, but I actually wrote something that I wanted to read, okay, because I thought it was very classy, and it was the COO of the Hamilton Tiger Cats organization that sent me this email. So I said I wanted to finally end up, that was on my last session, with this classy email that the COO of the Tiger Cats sent me. Okay, it's very classy, very genuine, and an appreciation for my efforts and a passion that he said I have for the CFL, and the appreciation he has for my CFL Red-Zone Rule and my special edition of my YouTube session that I especially did for the caretaker, Mr. Bob Young, the owner of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, on my CFL Red-Zone Rule. When the COO of the Tiger Cats organizations also confirmed that Bob Young received my emails to make him aware of my special edition of my YouTube session that I did for him. That was up on YouTube, and my optional provision part that I sent to him as well, that I think I mentioned last session, and one other very important closing email I sent him. The COO of the Tiger Cats, in his confirmation email, said that he sent to me, asked me to be a guest of theirs at a Tiger Cat game in Hamilton, which I thought, and that's a guest of theirs, that's with the caretaker and himself, and top management, which I thought was pretty big and a very important invitation for me to explore, that I'm very seriously thinking about doing. So I thought that was really, really amazing, okay? Amazing of him to do that. And that's the kind of respect he had for me and my passion and for my CFL Red-Zone Rule, and what I did for Mr. Bob Young, the caretaker, and did a special edition for him on my CFL Red-Zone Rule that's now up on YouTube. Okay? So let's get back to, okay, my session that I'm going to do. Also, getting back to 26, when I was referring to the $400,000 insurance, okay, that's the medical insurance coverage now that the players have from 1 year to 3 years, and it's going to cost $400,000. That's a minimum, okay? It's going to cost them $400,000 minimum. And what's unbelievable about this is they're doing the illegal hits causing the major injuries. So why aren't they heavily fined by the CFL, Mr. Ambrosi? Why are you taking more money from the owners that they can't afford to give and putting them further in debt? Okay, why aren't they heavily fined? Okay, and that would resolve it. You wouldn't see any more vicious illegal hits causing major injuries in the CFL. I just want to make that point. And I'm going to go into something else that Ambrosi said. Well, I'm going to try to live without reading as much as I can. Mr. Ambrosi, a while back, like he was in the Waggle. I said this before. I had a session on that on Sportsnet on a podcast with Stephen Brunt, and he said, you know, survival's not good enough. And he says the owners that have lost tens of millions of dollars that have invested in CFL franchises expect a good return, and that's not a little profit like Winnipeg and Edmonton made of $2 million. That's a good profit, $10 million, $5 to $10 million a year or more, and they deserve that. He says, and he talked about. By the way, I said last session one prior by mistake, 100,000 less Canadian-minded football players playing Canadian football, and a lot of them are playing 4 down, by the way, not 3 down, in their own country. In the last 10 years, it was 80,000. Can you imagine 80,000? And that's why, you know, Randy Ambrosi was said on the podcast. He said that that the CFL has to change, and that the CFL has to have the best available players playing in the CFL, okay, if they want to survive. I mean, and grow the brand of CFL 3-down football, and with the best rules, he said, and rules that are going to make our CFL 3-down game more entertaining and more exciting. Exactly what my CFL Red-Zone Rule will do, Mr. Ambrosi. So, what happened? He didn't deliver, and he didn't deliver for the owners because nothing happened. Okay, the Canadian ratio wasn't changed, not one bit. Okay, nothing happened. The owners got nothing. And why didn't you, Mr. Ambrosi? Okay, and Mr. Ambrosi also said that when they asked him about how the CBA deal was going, okay, on the podcast, he says, well, they decided with the Canadian Players Association and him, the commissioner of CFL, to deal behind closed doors and to not to speak to the media. Well, what was interesting is that Ramsey, the keeping, okay, to guaranteed ratio alignment, his executive and keeping the president and Canadian player reps were shooting off the whole time about all their big demands and what they wanted, and they're definitely going to get it. If they don't, they're going to strike. And they had a strike vote that went out, and they were ready to strike. And like I said, they held a gun against their head the last hour to get what they want. And the owners didn't get anything. Okay? So, you know, they were shooting off. So Ambrosi, if you really care about the owners, and by the way, who are you working for? Are you working for the players? Because he says, oh, he had too much respect for the players, so he wouldn't say anything. Well, who are you working for? The players, the Canadian players, that is, I'm sorry. Not the American, but the Canadian players. Or are you working for the owners? Because if you really cared about the owners and the CFL and the fans and what's best for a CFL 3-down game, you would have had a conference. You would have set up a press conference with the owners, and you would have laid out and laid it on the line why the CFL needs change. And I wrote some very important things down that you should have been saying to all the sports fans in Canada, because man, all the NFL only fans and the younger generation fans and many fans that walked away from our 3-down game, and all the season ticket holders that didn't renew, and look at the empty stands. Man, you need fans. So why didn't you speak to the sports fans in Canada and tell it the way it is, okay? And why you need change? You did nothing. What you did, you went in bed with the Canadian Players and Canadian Players Association and got what they wanted. You didn't get anything for the owners. Because Ambrosi, what you should have done, like I said, is a press conference with the owners. And you should have laid it on the line, okay? Okay, and come right out, okay, and made these points, okay? And said CFL and franchise CFL owners can no longer survive under this new current structure, current structure, where we have a Canadian Players Association, basically a monopoly, okay, with control and power over the CFL and their owners, with their guaranteed handcuffing dictating Canadian starter and huge guaranteed Canadian roster ratios, in who starts and plays in the CFL and who's on the CFL roster. They control it with their Canadian ratio. That's clearly not selling. That's the Canadian ratio that is not selling CFL 3-down football. Clearly not selling it. Obviously. And it's obviously old school and doesn't work in today's highly competitive sports world, okay? It's obvious it doesn't. And if it did, the NHL, the Canadian franchises, okay, would have a Canadian ratio. Can you imagine if the Canadian, I just want to go over this, okay? Try to just remember what I wrote. Can you imagine if the Canadian NHL, Canadian franchise, had a Canadian ratio where they were forced to start 7 Canadian players, okay, every game, and have half the roster Canadian. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if the Jays or the Raptors had that same rule, that they had to have 7 starting Canadians and half their roster Canadian? They would be all out of business. MLS soccer doesn't even have. They're not forced to play 7 Canadian starters. They're not forced to have half their roster Canadian. Okay? I think it's 3 in MLS soccer cities, and that's probably going to disappear. Okay? But can you imagine, even MLS soccer, and look at the difference in the MLS soccer CFL cities, the MLS soccer attendance versus the CFL attendance. They're killing the CFL in attendance. So, can you imagine? It's unbelievable. So what did Ambrosi did? He hid. He hid. No, he didn't hide. He was in bed with the Canadian Players Association, okay? And it was obvious the way what I laid out last session, okay? And what he did for them, and how manipulative it was, and how they tricked the vote, everything. And the owners didn't get anything, okay? So, do you really believe too? Do you really honestly believe, come on, do you think if there was no Canadian players on the Jays or on the Raptors or on any NHL teams that hockey fans and basketball and baseball fans would not go to see the Jays or Raptors and their NHL Canadian hockey franchises? Do you really believe that? That's unbelievable. And I'll tell you another thing. If a Canadian player is on an NHL hockey team, and there are, and starting, and on the Raptors, if there are, and on the Blue Jays, they deserve to be on those teams because they made the team. They actually made the team. They weren't given their starting or roster spots because of a Canadian passport and a Canadian ratio like in the CFL. And another thing, Can you imagine? You want to lay, they should have, Ambrosi and the owner should have laid this all out. Can you imagine as well? Can you imagine having a league, a so-called professional football league, where you can't even play your best receivers if they happen to be American? In most cases they are, because how many good Canadian receivers out there? Sinopoli, one. They can't even play them. Okay, in the preseason game in Calgary, okay? There's no Canadian ratio used in the preseason game, okay? So they played all their best American receivers and all the best American players, and guess what? Half of them are going to be sent home. And top American receivers are going to be sent home because there's no spot for them because the Canadian ratio takes up half the roster that's got to be Canadian, and 7 starters is got to be Canadian, and special teams, and backups and everything. So it's unbelievable. Can you imagine? Can you imagine having a league where you can't even play your best receivers or your best O-linemen that happen to be American to protect your investment, your quarterback that you're paying $700,000? Oh, and another thing, the CFL should have said, do you think fans rush to a CFL stadium and see a grossly overpaid, terribly overrated Canadian guaranteed ratio lineman? Okay, that can't even protect the quarterback that's being paid $200,000 plus, is not even good enough to be on the field, and CFL star quarterbacks are getting killed and injured? That's why CFL 3-down football is not selling. These are the reasons. And why didn't you lay it out, Ambrosi, with the owners? Why didn't you lay it out and tell the sports fans of Canada what's really going on in the CFL? What's really happening? No, you wouldn't, would you? Big cover-up. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And why didn't you talk about, and say, look, how are we ever going to have any continuity in the CFL with their one-year contracts? And it's just geared up so every year they can try to go to the NFL, okay? Why didn't you talk about that? 322 free agents can't even, coaches and GMs can't even build a CFL team, have any continuity, can't sell any jerseys. Can you imagine owning a CFL franchise, you can't sell any jerseys because of 22 free agents every year, over 30 players, okay, leaving because of the one-year contracts, and that's because of keeping brands and Canadian Players and Canadian Players Association. Okay, so you know what? And why didn't you say this, Ambrosi? Why didn't you say this at your press conference? And the top Canadians aren't even committed to the so-called CFL Canadian draft, because they want to go to the NFL, which they did. The top picks went to sign in the NFL, okay? And they're not even committed to the combine. 8 or 10 of them, the top ones didn't show up. The top pick didn't show up either. Why didn't you talk about that? And then why don't you say, the Canadian players say, if we reduce the ratio, no one will go to the games. Okay? They're not even committed to the CFL or the combine or the Canadian draft. Not even committed. And there's 20 plus, now probably 24, close to 24 down the NFL playing. How does that help the Canadian ratio? You tell me that. Okay? That's practically a whole starting team. Okay? In the CFL. Alright? So, Ambrosi, why didn't you say that? And why didn't you say, okay, we want the Canadian starter ratio abolished, and these are the reasons. And if not, then we'll just be 24 less Canadian starters, and they'll be replaced with better American players that are starting. You know what? You can't have that. You got to get rid of the Canadian starter ratio, which the owners wanted to get rid of, Mr. Ambrosi. They wanted to get rid of it, and what did you do? You did nothing for them. You did nothing for them. So, I mean, this is the real truth. Okay? I call a spade a spade. There's a big difference between opinion versus fact. These are all the facts. So why didn't you lay out all the facts? Ambrosi, why did you cover it up? And why didn't you lay out about all the facts, okay? About all the tens of millions of dollars in Montreal ready to fold that lost $12 million last year and 24 in the last 3 years, and all the empty seats and TV numbers down, okay? And CFL playoffs last year in the Eastern Final down 50%, Western Final down 30%, and the Grey Cup down 1 million viewers. The lowest, I think, since 2001, I believe. I don't know if that's totally accurate, but I think in 11, whatever, that may not be the proper number, but it's very close, okay? And why didn't you lay out all that, okay? It's unbelievable. You didn't do anything. You just let the Canadian players and the Canadian Players Association just keep, robbing from the CFL owners and putting them more and more in serious financial debt. Okay, like I said, there's a big difference between opinion and facts, and it's true. And the real facts are the majority of sports fans and the younger generation of sports fans are only interested in watching the best players starting and playing in professional sports leagues. And that's the market. That's the main market out there. The biggest market out there that the CFL needs desperately. Okay? And needs desperately to be watching CFL 3-down football. So the real, TV numbers, don't lie, and empty seats don't lie. And tell the Canadian players and the basic Canadian Players Association as well, the press conference, Ambrosi, that you should have had, that there would be no longer be controlling the CFL with their Canadian ratio, and that will be the end of it, and the CFL start their season with the best available players. Why didn't you say that? Why didn't you say that, Mr. Ambrosi? Why didn't you just lay it on the line? And that's what it should be happening. And like I said in my last session, what has to happen, TSN, you can't be desperate next time, because it's hurting you in your ratings. And they think they're going to get more money on the TV deal. How are they going to get more money when numbers like that, TV numbers like that? And they're probably going to be worse this year. And there's going to be more season ticket holders not renew when they find out about what what really happened with the CPA deal, and how the owners get scammed, and how the fans get scammed, and the American players get scammed and screwed. Okay, we got screwed. Okay? I went over that. I also wanted to talk about, the preseason games, and Ambrosi did nothing again against, for the branding and marketing, and can't even do that. I noticed the Calgary stamp logo, like this one, is at center field. That was left over probably from last year in the Western Final, but all the other ones, of course, Winnipeg with their new naming partner logo, it looks awful. Team logos, should be off limits. Limits should be at center field, and their team logos in the end zone. And of course, in Ottawa, same thing. Naming right partner's name at center field, blank end zones. It looks brutal. No logos in the not anything. Same garbage. Unbelievable. You can't even do that, Ambrosi. It's unbelievable. And what I wanted to say also during I also wanted to say something too that I think should be done too, is that the end zones, they were talking about this. I read this online. At BMO Field are 17 yards. Imagine, and some of the end zones are cut off in the CFL, so they should unify. Every end zone should be the same size, which should be 15, not 20, because 20 is actually with 65 somewhat a bit big. 10 is too small. Okay, even with 65. 15 would be ideal. Okay, and even better with my CFL Red-Zone Rule, I believe. But I'm okay with the 20, but 15 is better. Okay? All right, so I'm just going to keep going. I went over that. Went over that. The marketing and branding. Okay? So basically, now I just want to, I've covered pretty well everything I wanted to cover, and there's probably more. They wouldn't practice, they say they want to be partners and they want to be, with the CFL and grow the league and all this, okay? But it's never going to happen with this type of, the structure doesn't work. It's a dead format, and it's old school, and it doesn't work. I thought I had something written about that, and it's true. I also want to say about the Packers-Raiders NFL preseason game. I wanted to mention that in Winnipeg. Can you imagine that? How does How does that sell CFL 3-down football during a CFL season? Even if it's off season. You think the NFL would have a CFL preseason game during their NFL season? Come on. This is so desperate. You know why? Ambrosi is from Winnipeg. Ambrosi, okay, Miller, they're buddies. He's the CEO of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and he was a guaranteed Canadian racial player like Ambrosi was. Okay, that's the reason. And it's unbelievable. I mean, how is that going to help the CFL? It's not. It's going to hurt the CFL. But that's how desperate they are. It's unbelievable how desperate they are. So I just wanted to, I think I covered everything. I'm really surprised I covered everything so quickly that I wanted to. But in closing, I just wanted to say I'm very Canadian. You can't find anybody more Canadian. I went over that with you than I am, and I want what's best for the CFL. And and if a Canadian player, if you want to play in the CFL, okay, show you deserve to play in the CFL by earning your spot, roster and starting spot in the CFL team, and you'd be way more respected. So would the CFL would be way more respected. Okay, and want to play in the CFL, not the NFL. Okay, and that's what the CFL have as well. They build continuity as well with American players. I mean, and there's such an imbalance, okay, in the salaries in the CFL right now. The Canadian ratio and the star quarterbacks like Bo Levi Mitchell and Mike Riley taking all the money, but the Canadian racial players have taken most of the money and screwing the American players, and that's why the American rookie players are getting peanuts, and the other American starters are getting a lot less than the Canadian players and so forth because of the Canadian rate. It has to change. The CFL has to change, or they're not going to be around. So I hope they're around in 3 years, and I hope there's major changes, and I hope the owners and the American players and the American rookie players, they start the season and they bring down the Canadian Players Association and the Canadian ratio. I hope they bring it down. So the CFL can allow the best available players to start and play at every position for an entire CFL game, like every other professional sports league can, and bring in the most entertaining, most exciting new rule in CFL history, and that's my Spyder CFL Red-Zone Rule, and that will be Spyder's Combo. Implement that, and then you got a product to sell, and then you'll see more people watch and attend CFL games. Signing off, Spyder.